So there's Indigenous reconciliation, and then there's land. I want to break those two things apart because I think when we link them together is when you get comments like you got from that person who said that you're an alarmist, because they're looking at, I guess, the virtuous aspect of Indigenous reconciliation and how important that is with how do you run a civil society? How do you have a system? How do you have a functioning economy? What's your framework for your society to exist and prosper? And I think that this is an intersection of, on the one hand, well-intentioned Indigenous reconciliation practices with an activist socialist agenda that's got multiple motives, which has an impact on our culture, our politics, and our economy, and then by extension, the real estate market. So I'll put the real estate market aside for a moment and talk about the broader issues. So just in terms of numbers, the population of BC is about 5.7 million people. 300,000 of those people are considered First Nations. 100,000 of those are Métis. There's 200,000 people who live in, who are traditional Indigenous people, Squamish Nation, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, the Coast Salish Nation as a whole. All that, the West Bank First Nations who we work with, Seashell. You put all those people together, it's 200,000 people. They have had a horrible run. We can go back to all the rhetoric about colonization, whatever. A whole bunch of people came over here, such that now there's 5.5 million non-Indigenous people living in an area where they historically, many generations ago grew up. And our present day Indigenous population is a result of the reaction of those successive generations to that experience. And, the social issues in that area, like when I was a kid, were significant, whether it's mental health issues from residential schools, whether it's a result of being depressed and have mental health issues, which is alcoholism and drug addiction, whether it's being marginalized by the broader community so you can't get a good job. And then there's all the stereotypes that come with that, like you can't trust them, they never show up, they leave early, they steal shit. All that stuff. And when I was a kid, that was kind of the stereotypical narrative that's going around. And I don't think I'm exaggerating. To me, Indigenous reconciliation is getting rid of all that. It's about saying, you are a proud people. You have traditions that we need to acknowledge and respect. The 5.5 million people here have to welcome the 200,000 people into their lives and vice versa. We have to respect all of this. And to me, it was a lot about how we all get along. It wasn't about creating special rights. And that's where I think we start where Indigenous reconciliation starts to move towards political activism. There is the narrative, hey, you stole our land. To me, that's almost irrelevant. There's a modern world and there's an historic world that is never coming back. We'll never be a hunting and gathering society again, in my view. Like we're a modern industrial society. We have to deal with it as it is. And the idea that you take land arbitrarily, because it seems quite arbitrary, and give it to a small group of people to correct a wrong from a long time ago without thinking it through. And you do it predominantly in metropolitan Vancouver, where 3 nations were lucky enough to be where a city grew, as opposed to the bands up north that have nothing, that live in abject poverty, right? And they get nothing because they don't have anything to trade, and they're certainly very low profile. The whole file is being very poorly led by the federal government and provincial government. We got to call it like it is. I think the Indian Act, which is what it's still called, it's a disgrace. It's paternalistic. The federal government has so much power over I'll say First Nations, subject to my qualifier earlier, over First Nations. How can they possibly become autonomous? How can they possibly rise up and manifest their potential with that kind of paternalism and the dependence it's created? Like, just shut up, do what we tell you, we'll give you money. No one's sat down to say, how do we make it so that the cycle of dependence, the cycle of anger, the cycle of bitterness and resentment, that's not being discussed. And we're going straight to land deals. Now, BC's got the history of never having had proper treaties in the first place. And to the extent they have, subsequent governments broke those treaties, that's an egregious thing that needs to be fixed as well, is that you can't just then arbitrarily let a judge who reads a poorly written constitution where Aboriginal rights have not been extinguished and layer that in with an UNDRIP resolution, which is more of a spiritual piece of legislation, and read into it what that judge did and say, not only does Aboriginal title supersede the Crown, which was a huge stretch. It applies to land that's not even in your claim.
It's everything.
And basically, it's like, so I'll call that judicial activism. I'll call that bad legal work. I know you're supposed to respect the judiciary and respect the Crown, and I generally do. This was stupid. It was a bad decision. And I think that judge should be admonished, possibly lose her job. Because in our world, if you screw up that badly, you get fired. You have to start over again and learn your lesson and take your lumps and move on. But to your point, that creates so much uncertainty about ownership. That's a bad thing. Like if that expands to all of BC, expands to Canada, if it was ever to do that way, because it goes to the next level up and you have another activist judge, you know, who misinterprets law, in my view, and reinforces this notion. It starts to unwind things. And it's not like, oh, it's all going to be nice and it'll all work out. It won't. Because the 5.5 million people will say, screw that, and they get angry. And what do angry people do? They hurt people. You're kind of seeing the beginnings of that. So all the real reconciliation we need, where 5.5 million people welcome 200,000 people and vice versa, it turns into this. It's ironic that in trying to correct a wrong, we create a huge new problem that compromises the prosperity of all 5.7 million people. But we turn 5.5 million people, the majority, against the 200,000, go right back to where we were in 1949. What's the point? And how did we get here? It wasn't just the judge. It's the jurisprudence she was given, which came from the way the federal government and the BC government have managed this file for the last 10 years, which was give them what they want. We owe it to them because we were bad. And why did they really do that? Well, maybe it was because we were bad. Maybe it was whoever we is. Maybe it was out of misplaced compassion. I think there's something else here too, though. I think it's about, especially in BC, it's about a restructuring of our entire province. I think that, you know, this sort of activist, tell people how they should live view of the world, you do it when you're in government. You know, it's still a democracy. You're not always in government. Well, if you screw it up badly enough, if you let 200,000 people through, how many bands are in BC? I don't know, hundreds. They all have the authority to make land use decisions and to arbitrarily tell people how they can use their land. And they're not trained for it. It's not part of the culture. It's not part of the system. What is that going to lead to in terms of land use decisions and competence? Well, you need consultants. They're all going to have to hire. Who are they going to hire? They're going to hire the people running the government today, because that's who taught them to be activists in the first place. And so whether a guy like David Eby is the premier of the province, if he isn't, he can just go to the other file and run the province through the First Nations. I mean, that's a bit of a stretch. It's a bit speculative, but I mean, it's just so irrational. There's got to be something more to it than misplaced compassion.
What did you think of, did you see Dallas Brody's Making a Killing documentary? Did you ever watch that?
Yeah, I did. I didn't like it. I mean, there's a good point being made there for sure, but it goes too far. It goes
It maybe didn't land as well as it could have.
Look, if I was a kid, grew up in Capilano in the band there, I'd be pissed off. I would be pissed off because of what happened in history. I'd be pissed off because I'd look at how I live versus the people in Edgemont Village 4 kilometers away. I'd be pissed off because I would believe that my land had been stolen from me, and I would want it fixed, and I would probably, as a young man, want retribution. I get it. I think that, you know, for them to try to get as much as they can is rational. It makes sense. And for them to be aggressive in land claims is rational. And I don't have a problem with them wanting that. I have a problem with the rules of the game. It's not being well led. There's no framework. And the government whose job it is to do the right thing for everybody and all concerned, all 5.7 million people,
right there.
Isn't. They're not doing it.
That's right.
So that might be a good point. But what she did, she went further. And she did, in my view, the negative aspect of going too far in the land claims is that 5.5 million tell the 200,000 people they can go to hell. And when that happens, you don't have reconciliation anymore. You just have a divided society, a polarized society, and you have uncertainty about how it's even going to be run. It's a shit show. And I think that what we've done as a society is said, it's unpleasant. I'm going to go back to Edgemont Village. It's much nicer up there. Yes, I'll forget about it. Yes, it was this extreme thing. They'll sort it out. It'll go away. It's just getting worse and worse and worse. And I think that the fortunate thing about the Cowichan decision is it's a wake-up call to say, the time is now. We've got to fix it. And what we have to fix our Constitution. We have to fix that UNDRIP thing. We got to fix the jurisprudence, and we got to fix the judiciary. It's going to take very strong political action, very strong leadership that's willing to take on this very, very difficult file. But while they're at it, they should rip up the Indian Act and redo that and redefine, like go right to the top like you would in business, rebuild your business, rebuild this aspect of the country. And whoever takes that on is going to be called a xenophobic racist, even if they're not. And they're not going to win on any file because I'll stick to the 5.5 million people extended across the country. They will be pissed off no matter what because it's going to involve giving something up. And the 200,000 people will be pissed off because they're not going to get enough. And they're going to lose this gravy train of never being settled, always being able to ask for more, and always being able to get it by leveraging the guilt and leveraging the very poorly defined framework through which we're managing this file.